People often come back to games they've already quit. Some return to buy skins or cosmetics in games like League or Valorant, and some will return to pull for characters in gacha games despite not enjoying the game itself. Everyone seems to have some sort of collection, and I'm no exception. So why do we care so much about collecting things in video games? Let's start by defining the various types of collections in video games. There are completion collections such as achievements or Pokemon entries, status collections such as rare skins and cosmetic items, power collections such as characters, gear and upgrades, as well as creative collections such as housing decorations or fashion collections. There are many types of gamers, and they are naturally driven by different types of collections. However, we collect in games for more than just enjoyment. In a general context, the items in a collection must be related in one form or another. However, collection is not just about having an interrelated set that appeals to the collector, but rather the collector becomes the controller of a little world. These little worlds have the ability to create and release tension for the creator. Establishing a goal for the collection creates tension, while acquisition of a new item releases tension, which is why we can see games constantly flashing new characters or items at you while having a list of every collectible accessible in the game, as they effectively drive players to keep collecting and completing the collection. However, it is also very easy for players to have a completionist mindset. There are completion percentage indicators for missions, achievements, collection progress and more, which creates tension for the players and becomes one of the strongest psychological drives for the player. As our brains focus on what we don't have and creates a persistent feeling of incompleteness, that is what motivates further play. The final missing item often feels much more valuable because obtaining and completing it resolves the tension. Therefore, we can see that these two coupled mechanisms urge players into collecting. Initially, players start out blank and they're incentivized to complete tasks, collect characters, gears and more for rewards or inherent value they provide. But once we get started, we are also building our identity within the game. Our collection is a way for us to express our identity just as well, which encourages us to acquire the next thing for the collection. And when we are almost done, we will feel that it's a waste of time or even money if we quit. And we understand the amount of gratification we get from achieving a full collection, so the huge amount of tension keeps us going until a collection is completed. However, in a lot of video games there are countless obstacles that slow down the player from completing the collection drastically, which mainly include time gating and resource scarcity. These actually get players more hooked to the game. And there are a few reasons for this. Please keep in mind that not all of these reasons apply to every type of collectible in every game. First of all, obstacles increase the perceived value of the reward and keep the player's attention focused on the goal. For example, if a character is given to a player for free, then they might value this character less than the others, as the difficulty of obtaining something and experience becomes part of its value. Players usually unconsciously assume that if something is hard to get, then it must be worth something, and this is known as the effort justification effect. This brings us to the second reason. Our brain often enjoys anticipation as much as the reward itself, if not more. That is because our brains evolved to motivate us to pursue rewards, not merely to possess them. If we only feel rewarded from obtaining something, we will often give up before finding food, shelter or satisfying other survival needs. This is why our brains are wired to keep us moving towards goals. Anticipation is a prediction process. Whenever we see something valuable that has a possibility to be obtained, our brains start making predictions. And in a lot of games, valuable items and collectibles are distributed randomly, so this creates the possibility that we might be the lucky one, and they create excitement because our brains are simulating a desirable future. During the process of pursuing a collectible, we experience excitement, hope, curiosity, and uncertainty, but after obtaining the item, we only feel relief and satisfaction. In contrast, it is a much more pleasant and stable feeling as the mystery is gone, and all of the possibilities collapse into a single outcome. This is partly why we sometimes don't feel like logging into a game after grinding hard for a valuable collectible as well. And this is not only due to burnout. If you are interested in a video about this, make sure to let me know in the comments below. This leads us to the third reason. There is something called the goal gradient effect, which describes the people's tendencies to accelerate effort as they approach a goal. In most live service games, to obtain an item or character, you are required to obtain a certain amount of currencies or accumulate some progress. It feels nice when we are working through the first chunk of progress. But once we get close and see the finish line, this starts occupying a disproportionate amount of mental space. It creates a huge sense of urgency. When combined with the tension from the desire to collect and excitement from the anticipation, it becomes a very huge stimulus for the players. Players will try everything possible to reach that finish line quickly. This is why the last achievement or collectible in a game often feels much more important compared to the rest. And finally, overcoming obstacles creates a strong story for the player. The players will remember the experience of grinding through gameplay content and from all that build up, ultimately reaching a full completion or obtaining a valuable item. The experience of obtaining the previous collectible is much more memorable to the players, and since live service games always need to pump out new collectibles, they put the players into a same cycle with the next new collectible. Collection is fun, and it provides a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment, but it starts becoming unhealthy when it stops being a choice we enjoy and starts feeling like a compulsion, obligation, and emotional pressure loop that we feel compelled to satisfy. Anticipation can also outweigh the actual enjoyment of the game, while time sunk and sunk cost also starts driving players' behavior from their own investments. If we are not careful enough, this can cause a lot of severe time management and financial related issues. That sure sounds scary enough, and it is easy to think that game systems are purely manipulative after hearing all this. That is actually not the case. But we do need to be careful with what we engage in. Collection is fun and rewarding, and it can also be a meaningful and accessible way for players to express themselves. The problem only begins when we stop collecting for enjoyment and start collecting because we feel forced to. One of the best ways to avoid this is to be aware of the psychological forces at work. When we feel pressure to grind out limited time events, complete a collection we no longer enjoy, or even as far as spending money to avoid missing out, it is crucial to take a step back and ask ourselves a simple question. Are we doing this because we genuinely want to, or are we being put into a position where we will feel uncomfortable with not doing it? Games are meant to be entertaining and should never feel like a job or an obligation. If anticipation becomes more enjoyable than the game itself, if missing a collectible hits way harder than it should, and if the time and money we've already invested are the main reasons we're still playing, those are warning signs that the collection is starting to control us rather than the other way around. Collection should add to our enjoyment of a game, and not become the reason we get trapped in one. Through a combination of our psychological mechanisms and game design, collection systems are powerful not only because players want more things, but also because they tap into our desire for progress, completion, achievement, and self-expression. Collecting can feel incredibly rewarding, but it is also important to be mindful of the forces that drive us towards those goals. Through understanding how these systems work, we can continue to enjoy collecting while ensuring that we remain in control of our time, money, and well-being. I hope this video has been informative and entertaining. If there's anything you would like to add, make sure to comment down below. Thanks for watching.